Hello everyone, welcome back to a very special Kerbal Space Program 2 video, because today, guys, is my very first time playing... What version are we even on now? Kerbal Space Program 2, patch number 3, hotfix number 2? Or hotfix number 3? Anyway, a hotfix just came out for Kerbal Space Program 2 post-patch 3 but pre-patch 4, which purportedly fixes literally one of the worst bugs in the game. That bug being that weird glitch where your trajectory around the sun changes when you change your sphere of influence. So, for example, doing an escape burn from, say, Duna, you do the burn, you watch your orbit line on the map screen, and it intersects Kerbin nicely, but then as soon as you leave Duna's sphere of influence, suddenly trajectory is way off. It's like literally the exact opposite of what was predicted. It was a horrible bug, 0 out of 10, would not recommend. It really killed kind of the thrill, or I guess even just the thinking about doing interplanetary travel. Nightmare. And it really prevented me like doing anything too ambitious. Like I debated doing a Joule 5 mission when that was the KSP 2 weekly challenge, but I'm like, you know what? I literally just can't face the whole trajectory bug issue, among everything else with KSP2, like the wobbly rocket and stuff like that. So I didn't bother. But now maybe the interplanetary travel supposedly is more reliable. I might be able to try a few more missions and probably will be slightly more motivated to play this game a bit more now that it's like slightly less broken. I thought I'd take things somewhat conservatively with the first outing though. I didn't want to go anything too crazy in case the bug was persisting, or lo and behold some new bug has appeared in the game. So I thought let's just do a nice simple Duna mission. And I really like how this came out actually. You can see the lander at the top of the stack just there. I took inspiration from Blue Origin's proposed lunar lander by having the crew module at the bottom and the fuel tank on the top, with those thud engines on the side. And I wince as I describe that lander, because you're watching take 1 at the moment, you know, building the craft, but when it comes to the launch, that, my friends, is take 2. Interactive private division. Take 2 moment. Whatever, that was a terrible joke. But yes, the first time I did this mission, partly my fault, I didn't test the craft, I just ran the numbers on, I was like, yeah, that should work, and just launched. But then when it came to using those third engines, well, I'll show clips of take 1 when we get to the point in which the whole thing fell apart. But yeah, lots of twists and turns, guys. Blood, sweat, and tears were shed for filming this mission. So I hope you enjoy what's to come, and don't forget to leave a little like down below if you do enjoy the content so far, and continue to enjoy it. And really helps me out about the algorithm, all that stuff. We have to do that as YouTubers these days, in this day and age. I sometimes like look at the YouTube homepage every so often, and it's like, my goodness, how do I compete? There's like this video of like Mr. Beast crashing a train into a pit. I have no idea if it's fake. It must be, right? But I haven't watched it. But I'm like, oh, this is what I'm going to compete with. Well, I'm doing a video about a video game patch. It's not really the same, is it? But I tell you what is the same, guys. The Duna transfer window never changes. If you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Duna, the angle that line forms at the sun, that'd be 45 degrees. But enough of that. Let's launch. Bit of a false start there. We went down before going up, but it was fine. This like blue. I think the SLS would look good in blue. What do you think? It like fuses the like a reminder of the Delta 2. At least had the Delta 4 Heavy for some reason, which is way off because that's an orange rocket, just like the SLS, and it's a triple core rocket, just like the SLS isn't. But you know, this is kind of an SLS-esque machine. Got that nice blue center body flanked by those 2 big SRBs. And for the central 4 engines, I'm using a cluster of 4 mainsail engines on an extra large engine plate. And this is not a setup I've ever done before, actually. Normally my go-to engine for large stacks are just either 2, 3 or 4 Mammoth engines. But I always find that my rockets just flip out and they're not very well controllable with the Mammoth engines. Maybe the gimbal's too high. And I don't really want to use the Vector. That's just too predictable, isn't it? So I thought, let's just try 4 mainsail engines. And, you know, the core with the 4 central main... Let's try that again. The core with the 4 mainsail engines doesn't have enough thrust-to-weight ratio to get off the pad on its own. But with the power of those SRBs, we did have enough power. What a great sentence that was. And here we are cruising our way to space. And yeah, it's not really too wobbly, this rocket, so I was very proud of it. I'm kind of starting to learn how to kind of build ships in this game that don't wobble too much. Like, there is still too much wobble. Like, it's hard to tell, and the payload is inside this fairing, so any sort of subtle wobbliness with the payload, which I'm sure there is, you wouldn't be able to see. But basically, just keep strutting up the vertical stack, which, you know, I think is dumb. You shouldn't have to run struts up a vertical stack, but you do. So that's, you might have seen in the build time, that's what I did. I just strutted all the vertical tanks to each other, and that seemed to make the rocket fairly stable during the launch. Don't want to speak too soon though. The fairing deployment was anything but smooth. Yeah, they kind of, it didn't really separate properly, and then they all just suddenly hurtled towards the planet. So yeah, fairings are still a bit bugged in this game. I think they're definitely getting better between the patches, but yeah, there's still some work that needs to be done with the fairings, I think. Now, I'm very excited to showcase this part of the mission. I kind of went to say the mission, and then I started saying the vehicle, and then I'm just saying the you know. But look at that engine. It's the new tuba engine. I think it's the tuba with the extendable engine bell. It's kind of there to sort of bridge the gap between the efficient hydrogen engines and the less efficient but more powerful Methalox engines. So this is a Methalox engine, but it's got very high ISP in the vacuum of space. And space, or more specifically a stable orbit, is exactly where we are. So let's waste no more time in getting towards our destination, which of course is Duna. First things first, I'm going to make a maneuver node. Usually it's between 1,200, 1,300 meters per second I aim for, and then I just take that plotted maneuver and just swing it around my low Kerbin orbit until I get the Duna encounter nodes nice and close, which is only possible because we launched at a Duna transfer window, which I sort of mentioned earlier, but I was a bit tongue-in-cheek about it. If you are new to Kerbal Space Program, sorry, devs, but probably play KSP 1. It's a bit more forgiving at this point. But if you were to draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Duna, and the angle that line forms at the sun should be about 45 degrees. If the planets are in that position, that means that Duna is in an optimal location, so that when you make a maneuver node from low Kerbin orbit, you'll just easily get one without too much hassle. It's still kind of difficult. I remember when I first was playing the game, it took me a while to get Duna encounters, so maybe you might not get it as quickly as I did just then, but it's certainly, you can't get a Duna encounter without doing that, basically, unless you really want to mess around in interplanetary space. And interplanetary space is where we're going next. We've done our initial burn to get to Duna. We're not on an optimal encounter just yet. We're passing a bit too far below the planet. So we're going to do a mid-course correction burn. Doing this kind of inclination change, it's better to just wait till about halfway there before doing it. Otherwise, you'll just waste lots of delta V doing an unnecessarily expensive burn. I have muted the game volume, actually, for a little bit, because those, like, clicks and clacks of the time warp arrows, it's so obnoxious when it's all, like, edited into video. Like, it's fine when you play in the game, you know, when you, like, press the period and comma keys, it goes click, 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 click when you're doing the time warp. It's fine during gameplay, but, like, trying to, like, listen to me commentate, and obviously the footage is sped up, so the clicks are really rapid, and there's loads of them. Oh, it gets a bit annoying. I hope there's, like, maybe an option in the far future, like, devs, don't prioritize this at all. But in the far future, maybe there's, like, or maybe there's an option now, I haven't checked, in the audio settings of the game to kind of mute UI actions. Can UI actions be muted in the audio? I'm sorry if it can, and I'm just completely ignorant. I need to look this up. Future Matt, when you're proof watching this video, write this down. Go check the audio settings out in Kerbal Space Program 2. And here we are, guys, arriving in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in Duna. Look at that. There it is. Oh, hang on. Bit of a bug there, actually. Sometimes when you exit the map screen, the camera is inside your rocket. That might already be a known thing, or it was just a weird thing with this particular mission. But yeah, I noticed a couple of times that, like, when I exited the map screen, I was just inside that orange fuel tank. And there is that beautiful piece of pepperoni looming into the foreground there. Now, one thing I really like about KSP 2 that wasn't in KSP 1 is that you can kind of create a maneuver node that gets you into a perfectly circular orbit predictably. Like, you kind of had to just sort of guess it in Kerbal Space Program 1, but Kerbal Space Program 2's maneuver node maker, or I should say maneuver node planner, no, it's just maneuver planner, actually predicts your orbit and takes into account things like thrust to weight ratio to make it much easier for setting up burns like this. So good job, KSP 2. I like that feature a lot. And, you know, it isn't something that I would have probably thought of if I was put in charge of the game. So, yeah, that was great. And, yeah, there's been a lot of... I guess, discourse in the community recently with the slowness of patches and the fact that a lot of the promised features, which has obviously been talked about to death at this point, it's including things like re-entry heating, which is only supposed to be missing for like a very short period of time, where we now, coming up on 5 months after release, it's still not in. A lot of people are starting to get a little bit, understandably, a little bit concerned about the game. And I'm going to continue this topic in a second. I'm just going to talk about this thing. I deorbited here because I've got a stack separator between the lander and the mothership, because I just don't trust docking ports in this game. I think they might still be a little bit bugged, so I had the two ships separate via a stack decoupler. I didn't want to leave it stuck in orbit, so I put the whole thing on a suborbital trajectory, detached the two ships, and now that stack separator will, burn up in Juno's atmosphere. I did forget to put the crew on the lander before doing this, though, so then I had to do a quick danger EVA to get Valentina Kerbin and Tim C. Kerbin into the lander, ready for their surface expedition. But yes, back to the topic that I just started before having to quickly explain my landing situation about, the concerns that a lot of the community has about the future of Kerbal Space Program 2's development. And, some of the developers and the ins and outs and shortcomings of some of their previous work. So I'm not going to speculate or really cover that sort of thing. But, I do have faith. I think it's a shame that KSP2 is taking so long, and everyone said, it was meant to be coming out 2020. But guys, we have to remember what happened with Star Theory. Star Theory just was shut down, loads of the devs just left, and then a lot were poached by Take-Two Interactive with Intercept Games, and it was super sketchy. They weren't even told they were fired until they saw a LinkedIn post, or something along those lines. Who knows how much of the code was lost or messed, or maybe it was even sabotaged during this move. I think there's a lot of stuff that will just never come to light that probably put major delays in the project. But obviously, earlier this year I was at ESA and we got to play KSP2 before all of you plebeians got to. And there was a little speech from Nate, just for our eyes only, so we weren't able to record it, unfortunately. And I can prove that this speech did in fact happen with the last thing I recorded before we were told we couldn't record.
Everything you're going to see in here, things that we're going to show on the screen, the presentations, the talks, it's for your eyes only. So if you're recording right now, if you can go ahead and just turn that off for me.
So I know that's not proof of anything, but there were talks that were confidential. And one of the talks was from Nate, talking about his love of Kerbal Space Program and showing some of the emails that he would send to his friends and colleagues, desperately trying to get them to play the game. This is back in the game when the game was I'm sorry, but the game was bad when it first came out. It had a lot of jank to it. I mean, maybe it was bad because we know now how amazing the game became. But literally, there was no mun. There was at one point Kerbin was flat. I'm not sure if that ever made it into the official kind of first release, but there was very little to the game, and he was super enthusiastic about it. And I know from general public interviews he said this as well, where he was always just the Kerbal guy. And when he was approached to say by Take-Two to say, hey, do you want to work on the sequel, it was the biggest day ever for him. So I know he's not just phoning this in. I don't think this is just another job for Nate and he's just trying to cash in and then move on to something else. I genuinely do believe that him and all the other developers, both the ones I've met and I haven't met, I think they all have the heart to make the game what they want it to be. And for me, I can't wait for colonies. Specifically the infrastructure stuff, setting up delivery routes and trying to optimize delivery routes to get them as efficient as possible. I'm a bit of an infrastructure nerd. I love OpenTTD. Best game. Ironically, I got into that game really, really heavily a few days after I got my 4090 graphics card. So that was a real good burn-in test. Probably wasn't really utilizing the power of the 4090. I don't think OpenTTD, a game made in the 90s, had ray tracing. Could be wrong, though. And contrast that all, obviously, to this game, which I don't think this is really utilizing the 4090 either, but that's more of an optimization issue, I think. Now, maybe this sounds silly, but I'm surprised by just how much I love the fact that Kerbal's, their footsteps make sounds on Juno, and anywhere else, really. I mean, listen to this. Oh, I stopped walking. Give it a second. It's hard to put into words, but I feel like it really highlights that we're on this really desolate place. All you can just hear is faint footsteps and the echo and just nothing. which is just like what real Mars would be. In fact, you probably wouldn't even hear your footsteps, right? Because the atmosphere is so thin. And I don't know, it's just really sort of elevated that feeling of kind of isolation that, yeah, you're a long way from home, and hopefully the lander all works and the mothership works. And whoops, did I just say that out loud? That's right, we're cutting back to take 1 of this mission, where I finished the Juno landing and all that, got back on the ship, and decided to take off. Now look at the Delta V. We got so much Delta V, more than enough. For reference, for Juno, you need just shy of 1,500 meters per second to reach orbit. So we got plenty. But look, let's just speed the footage up. Look how fast I'm burning through my Delta V numbers and how little surface velocity and altitude I'm gaining. And these are the third engines, which are really powerful. Like, they're designed for like first stages on Kerbin, for reference. They should be plenty powerful for ascending on Juno. But I barely make it anywhere at all, and I'm like, am I just stupid? How is this happening? So I had a look at the craft a little bit more closely, and it dawned on me that the bottom of that crew module is actually slightly flared. And I was like, is the engine exhaust hitting that little lip at the bottom of the crew module, and it's somehow deflecting the thrust and nerfing the engines or something like that? So I did some tests on Kerbin. This is a completely unmodified version of the lander, unchanged from what I used on the mission. It didn't even get off the ground when it absolutely should have, so I went to the vehicle assembly building and just offset the engine so they're way off from the main body of the craft. So let's see if this works. Oh yeah, I realised that rockets flip a lot more easily if you have the gimbal set to yaw on the gimbal control, so there's a little top tip. But, as you saw, it worked. So that was the reason. You've got to be really careful with those thud engines, apparently, because just that little lip at the bottom of that Mark II crew cabin is enough to just completely destroy the engine's performance. So, taking those lessons learned, this is the craft that I used for the second take that you've been watching up until now. I managed to offset the engines just enough so that they still worked, but also so they weren't just floating in space. Like, they are still visibly connected to the fuel tanks. And yeah, now we have a very optimal performance. In fact, in retrospect, the third engines are probably a bit overkill for this lander. But there's no cheat menu in KSP2, so it's much harder to test craft out. I know you can like edit save files, so I just couldn't be bothered, you know. I just said, let's just pick an engine that I know 100% will be enough, and it'll be fine. And ironically, that engine didn't work. So that was my hubris, really. Maybe I should, in future, always take the time to test vehicles properly, even if it means having to open up a notepad and change a few lines of text in the save file editor. Or maybe they could just add the cheat menu. That would be nice. I mean, I guess there's probably a mod at this point that adds this all in. I really need to look at the mod scene for KSP2. Although, speaking of mods, I do have my custom flag, and my custom flag actually worked when the Kerbals placed it. So that was neat. And I actually realized that this is another little cool thing I never noticed in KSP2 until today. And that is that flags are no longer mirrored. So if you have a flag in KSP1 with text on it, from one side of the flag, it'll be nice. But you go on the other side of the flag, and it's all mirrored, because it's literally just mirroring the PNG file. But in KSP2, the text is readable on both sides. It's not just mirroring, basically. It has the PNG, I guess, twice on either side of the flag's texture, so that it's always readable if there's text on the flag. That was just a nice little feature. So good job, KSP2 developers. Ironically, saying that right as a bug is manifested on the screen. The mothership was just spinning out of control for no reason, so I had to switch to it, and it took a while for SAS to regain control, and I noticed that this engine tends to sometimes want to retract itself. So if you want to use those new extendable nozzle engines, set them to an action group, so that when the nozzle ends up retracting spontaneously, you just have to press an action group to get it to redeploy, rather than have to go through the clunky parts manager. I'm still not sold on the parts manager, I'm sorry. I mean, partly because of the fact that when you try and open it, there's always that painful lag moment. I know it's realistically only a second, but it's just annoying enough where I wish we just had our, and again, I know for a fact that there is a mod, or at least there was a mod. Maybe it doesn't work after patch 3, but they should probably get it working again soon, I would have thought, that does actually bring back KSP1 style UI, when you just right click a part and it just comes up with the menu for that part. Simpler times, those KSP1 days. Simpler times. No, I decided to take the Delta V penalty and leave my lander attached to the mothership for the journey back to Kerbin, just so that the Kerbals have a bit more room to kind of walk around. There's 4 of them. I thought if I give them a lander there, there's like another room there. I'm guessing the interior of the lander is the same as the interior of that lander can in KSP1 because it's literally the same part. And in KSP1, there's like a little laboratory in that lander. There's like some cupboard space. Things like that, enough room to stretch out, stretch your legs. So it'd be nice to just have that there. I'm just going to pretend there's like a tube that runs through that liquid fuel tank so the Kerbals can just crawl through and not have to go on EVA. I can kind of forgive myself for making this kind of outlandish assumption because of the fact that in KSP2, engines and fuel tanks are way, way heavier than their real-life counterparts. Like, if this vehicle existed in real life, it would have way more Delta V than what it does in this game. So I could just say, like, well, it's artificially got less Delta V because a lot of that tank is literally just like crawl space for the Kerbals to get to the lander. That's how I sleep at night anyway. Now, I'm going to just force a junior encounter because I couldn't be bothered to wait for a Kerbin encounter. And my goodness, I realize, guys, my hubris once again, because like earlier I said I couldn't be bothered to do tests. I'm just going to use an engine that I know will work. Ironically, that engine being literally the only engine in the game that wouldn't have worked for my lander. And the same thing happened here. So I decided to make a maneuver node that just, maneuver plan, that gets me on a trajectory around the sun that just intersects Kerbin's orbit. And then we can go out and make another maneuver node that then forces a Kerbin encounter, for want of a better way to describe it. You can just watch the footage when it comes about and you should see what I'm on about. But for some reason I was getting a bit of a glitch where I couldn't get a Kerbin encounter to appear. And then another glitch happened, which you'll see in a second. So yeah, all fun and games, but it was fine. I guess it was just another cruel, twisted way the game was telling me that I should have just waited for a Juno to Kerbin transfer window and done the mission properly. Anyway, we are now on a trajectory around the sun that intersects Kerbin's orbit, so I'm going to make a maneuver node, and I'm just going to swing on the prograde and retrograde until I can get some encounter nodes to get nice and close. And I was like, well, these guys are really close. They're 2B and 2A. Sorry, guys, I play at 4K, and I realized that, like, now aspects of the UI are really teeny tiny. Luckily, this video is available in 4K if you want to, but I'm aware, some people can't stream that high bit rate. But yeah, just showing you the kind of the distance between these two encounter nodes. It's very, very close. Like, there's no way that we wouldn't be entering Kerbin's sphere of influence because it's the margin is so small. But I just didn't have a Kerbin encounter there. So I thought, maybe there's some glitch. So let's just time warp to the maneuver node and hope that, once we do the burn, we'll just get the Kerbin encounter. But the auto time warp didn't drop out of time warp when I got to the maneuver node. So now I'm like going around the sun again. I don't know if that was associated with the fact that I pressed the auto time warp button while the game was paused, which is technically another instance of time warp state in this game, and so it got confused. So I guess if you want to do auto time warp, make sure you're playing at 1, you're not paused, and then the auto time warp should work. So yeah, luckily when I made my second maneuver node, I could easily get a Kerbin encounter. So I think if you're in another planet's sphere of influence and you try and make your mid-course correction burn before leaving said planet's sphere of influence and heading into interplanetary space, you will struggle to get an encounter with a planet or moon. I'm not sure what was causing it, to be honest, but that's my theory. But did you guys... God, Josh, I skipped over, I glossed over, I wasn't paying attention, I'm sorry. But look, did you see? Our trajectory around the sun did not change when we left Juno's sphere of influence. How epic gamer is that, guys? This is amazing. So normally what would have happened, I now have to kind of describe this retrospectively, but obviously my burn to leave Juno put our orbit around the sun so that the periapsis was, at Kerbin's level, i.e. we were going from Juno's orbit to an orbit around the sun that was lower than Juno's orbit. Before patch 3, or should I say, this latest hotfix, that wouldn't have happened. Instead, we'd have ended up in an orbit higher than Juno. Like, it literally would have been the exact reverse of what we did. So it was really annoying. So but there was some predictability to it. So you could sort of basically do your burn wrong in the planet's sphere of influence that you're trying to leave. And then when you do leave the sphere of influence, you should then be on a more correct trajectory. Obviously an imperfect solution, though. So I'm really glad that it's now seems to be fixed. Obviously for me, I have a sample size of 1 mission, so can't quite confirm that it's done just yet. But hopefully this is a sign that it is. Have you been playing the game since the latest hotfix? Have you had the sphere of influence change bug? Let me know in the comment section down below. And also what you thought of this video, because as you can see, we're here, we're coming home to Kerbin. So there's not really much video remaining. And I guess I've not got much stamina remaining, apparently, with that little blooper just there. So I guess it's a good thing that this mission is coming to an end. What can I say? I had to film this mission essentially twice, to create this video. So again, I hope you enjoyed. And here we are, splashing down. Here we go. Dropping it down to real-time speed. Beautiful little touchdown. A little bit choppy. Waters are a little bit, a little bit rough. If you want to help raise some funds to get our poor crew some anti-seasickness tablets, then why not support me on Patreon or my YouTube channel member page, like the wonderful folk on the left did. It really helps me out, guys, so unironically, I really, really appreciate your support. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to you for watching this video. There are 2 more videos on screen from me that YouTube thinks you'll like. Hopefully they're good picks. One of them might be my latest Kit Bash Model Club video where I played with the original creator of KSP 1. How fun is that? I asked him about KSP 2, so yeah, watch that if you want to. Bye!